Hello, this presentation is called Camp Hill, My Community in Words and Pictures. My name is Melissa Shuttle, and I am a Master's in Social Work student at Widener University. So today we're going to focus on Camp Hill, the demographic information, and whether or not this is what is referred to as a good community from the community literature for this particular class. So we want to look at who lives in Camp Hill. What is the gender, education, and income makeup of our community? Camp Hill is approximately 2.4 square miles. It has approximately 8,000 people. There are 91 males for every 100 females. The median age of a Camp Hill resident is approximately 40 years old. We have 6,000 of our residents who are over the age of 21. 94% of Camp Hill residents are high school graduates, and 59% of residents have had some college or more. So what that tells us is that Camp Hill is a fairly educated community. This is a much higher rate of education than other surrounding communities in the area. 7.2% of residents fall below the poverty line, and the median income is $78,161. However, the largest group of residents in Camp Hill makes $100,000 or more. So who lives in Camp Hill in terms of racial demographics? As you can see from this graph, the predominant ethnic group in Camp Hill is Caucasian. That is who predominantly lives in Camp Hill. There is a growing Asian population and a smaller Latino and African American population. Asian population, I want to say, is around 12%, and African American and Latino make up about 7 or 5% of the additional population. So this is a breakdown of the kinds of crime that tend to occur in Camp Hill. Camp Hill is a fairly safe place to live. Most people leave their doors open, don't worry about that much crime. There's almost no violent crime in Camp Hill, and most of the crime that exists is theft, which means, your bike gets stolen, stuff like that. 12% of the crimes committed are burglary related, very low compared to other area populations. There's some robbery, very, very small amount of that, and the other portion makes up violent crime and other drug-related crimes, which is very, very low in Camp Hill. We have a really great ratio of police per capita, and we have a very well-resourced police department, and I believe that this is one element of why our community has such a low crime rate. Police in Camp Hill are very engaged in the community. They have night out festivals where they are introducing the community to all kinds of resources, and we really love our police here. So where does the majority of people who live in Camp Hill tend to work? One of the benefits of living in Camp Hill is that we're located in Cumberland County, which is, according to Jim Hertzler, the county commissioner, the fastest growing county in all of Pennsylvania. And part of that is that we have some fairly major national and international corporations that have their base of locations right here in the area, some of which are even in Camp Hill. For example, Highmark, Capital Blue Cross, Rite Aid Corporation. These are all located directly in Camp Hill, and Giant Anhold Company, which owns Giant Food Stores, and Hershey Company are very close by. Many of our community members tend to work for these large corporations, as well as other insurance companies that are located in the area, which include Select Medical, and there are a number of large hospitals. There is a hospital in Camp Hill, Holy Spirit Medical Center, that employs a great deal of people. UPMC Pinnacle is very nearby. There are 2 branches of that within close driving distance to Camp Hill, as well as Penn State Milton Hershey Hospital and Regional Trauma Center. So there are a lot of really great places to work, and This area is also home to burgeoning small brewing companies like Appalachian Brewing Company and Trogs. These are new ways of improving and growing our economy, and Amazon Distribution Center has recently located nearby in Carlisle. So we have a lot of opportunities for employment here in Camp Hill, which explains why our community is growing and thriving, as Jim Hartzler said in a recent speech. So Camp Hill is fairly educated. And before I delve into all the myriad higher education institutions, I want to speak a little bit to our school system here in Camp Hill. We have a wonderful school district. It is part of what keeps people moving to Camp Hill. And one of the great benefits of having a great school district is that becomes a self-selecting aspect of our community, in as much as people who value education, whatever swath of socioeconomic part of the community they are, people who tend to move here because they want their children to go to our good schools. And so what that means is that we have a fairly educated, self-selecting community of people who value education. And with that comes a subset of other values that are positive for the community as well. Aside from that, we also have a number of academics who are employed at these local universities and colleges that live in town and are part of the fabric of our community here as well. Very close by, we have Dickinson College, Messiah College, Lebanon Valley College, Gettysburg College, and Elizabethtown College. These are all within a half an hour to 40 minutes drive of Camp Hill community. And as I said, many of my friends and neighbors are academics who work at these institutions. My husband included, he is a professor at Messiah College, and there are several of my neighbors who work at Messiah, Lebanon Valley College, and Gettysburg College that I know, and Dickinson. And actually a few people that even commute all the way up to Bucknell, which is also nearby. So we have a lot of resources local to us. Including that, we have Harrisburg University, and Penn State Harrisburg. We also have a community college in Hack and Central Penn College as well. So we have a lot of access to education. In addition to that, Camp Hill has a great many places to worship. Just within Camp Hill's bounds, we have several churches. We have the Church of the Good Shepherd, Trinity, Mount Calvary, Camp Hill Methodist, Camp Hill Presbyterian, Camp Hill Church of Christ, Camp Hill Church of God, West Shore Baptist, Liberty Church, and Edge Church. So there are many different Christian churches in town, and nearby we have local mosques and synagogues in Harrisburg. So we have a lot of access to religious worship in our community, and people here do tend to attend church fairly regularly. Most of these institutions have full parking lots every Sunday. And that brings us to community organizations. We have a great many different community organizations in the area. Goodwill, Community Aid, and Salvation Army all have stores nearby or in Camp Hill. We have a great many different community organizations who have their base of locations here in Camp Hill. For example, Pennsylvania Advocacy Resources for Autism and Intellectual Disabilities is here, Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation, PA Safe Kids Coalition, Pennsylvania Association of Community Health Centers, Rails to Trails Conservancy, Disabled American Veterans, United Cerebral Palsy, Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, Nobody's Cats Foundation. These are all located in Camp Hill. And the Caring Place and Food Bank are located nearby, and these are also community resources in as much as the Caring Place addresses the needs of bereaved children, and Food Bank provides food for people in the community that might be struggling to feed their families. So we have a lot of access to community organizations here in Camp Hill. This here is a map of the majority of Camp Hill. And what you'll notice at the center is Market Street. And Market Street is home to our economic and business district. And there are many businesses located in Camp Hill. One of the wonderful things about this 2.4 square miles, is there are very few things one needs to leave Camp Hill to get. In fact, probably no things. You can probably buy just about everything you need within walking distance of your home, and see your doctor and access a hospital, all very close to your home community. For this reason, many retirees enjoy staying in their homes, and some retirees even move to town because it allows you to have access to a great deal of services, supports, and goods that you can access via walking. So at the edge of town here, we have our shopping center, which is the Camp Hill Shopping Center. Located in there is our giant food stores, several smaller businesses, and a Boscov's. And so we have a department store, banks, some food service places, Panera, Arby's, etc. This is all at the edge of town. Then we have some green space and sports fields at the center of town, over by Yale Avenue, and we have some newer green space over by where Schaefer School was located, and there is a great deal of green space in our community despite the fact that we are a small town. So there are some features of our community that you can now familiarize yourself with. So here are some pieces of demographic information that are interesting for Camp Hill. So in terms of the minority population, most of the minority families who live in Camp Hill tend to live behind the shopping center. Where this information is kind of important is that as a walking school district, we do not have buses to school, and that means that people who live in this area of town need to walk to school and cross over this large highway. And some of them may not have access to a car. Their parents may work. They may not be able to drive their kids to school, which is right over here on Chestnut Street. And some of what's been going on recently is that there's talk of a fast food restaurant going in on the corner of Chestnut and 1115, and that would really create a lot of traffic to make it more difficult for these kids to walk to school. So it's important to be aware of things like that, because we don't want to be disenfranchising people, and we want to make sure that we're creating safety for everyone, not just people who have socioeconomic advantages. So over here we have our income to poverty level. And as you can see, Camp Hill is fairly economically diverse despite being a small town. We have people who are affluent, we have people who are in middle income, and we have people who are lower income, all living in this very small space. And we have to, when we're planning for services, when we're planning for programs, we have to make sure that we're balanced and that we're creating programs and services that are accessible to every part of our community and not just a de-advantaged few. There are some other important demographic information, which is the amount of people who live in our community that are over the age of 64. We have a fairly high population of people who are over the age of 64. Understanding this can help us to plan for different services and supports that we might be able to provide to that quadrant of our community. It's really important to understand who we are and what our makeup is, so that when we are designing programs, again, we are designing programs that address community needs. So what this tells me is that this would be a great place to create some senior support, maybe senior outreach, maybe meetups for seniors, or different activities that seniors can participate in, because this is a large portion of our population, and we do need to think about what their needs are. So the next demographic screen I have is people who are married or single in Camp Hill. And as you can see, Camp Hill is fairly married. Most of the people who are in the areas of town that are higher socioeconomic places tend to be married, and places where people are maybe not as well off tend to be single. So you'll have your younger starter families in certain neighborhoods and other families that are perhaps single parent living in certain neighborhoods, and then people who can afford to live in larger homes live in other neighborhoods as well. And you just sort of get a sense of who lives where and what those issues might be and what those needs might be. So it's helpful to understand that while by and large many of the people that live in the community are in married dual income families, there are places where those things are not going on, and there might be different needs that we need to be focused on addressing in those kinds of communities. So moving on, I'd like to look at the article that we were asked to read and examine is the article called Seeking the Good Community from the OSU Extension in 2015. And this article identifies 9 elements of a good community. And we will look at Camp Hill through the lens of each element. They are as follows. Safety. Is this community a safe place for people to live and work and play? Are there access to goods and services that people can get a hold of what they need and how they need it? Are there relationships between members of the community that bind, that create a sense of cohesion where people feel known and seen and valued? Are there common goals and values? Is this a place where people share their beliefs and share their values with one another? Is the community looking at the whole person and the needs of a whole person, and not just specific things, but just the whole person and the whole person, who they are and what that person contributes to the community? Another aspect of a good community is predictability. Are there predictable things about the community? What can be anticipated? These are important factors as well. Recognizing people and their place in the social structure. Is that something that's a part of the community fabric? Are there opportunities in the community for people all throughout the different socioeconomic statuses? And despite what people may believe, some level of homogeneity is a big part of what makes a good community, because I'm guessing that part of the reason for this is that some homogeneity causes people to have collective needs that are similar, and so it's easier to address those needs as a wider community. So, safety. Camp Hill has a fairly low crime rate, as I discussed earlier, and as the evidence shows. Most of the crimes that are committed in Camp Hill are oftentimes retail theft, and this is due to having a lot of retail locations within the borough. So retail theft, while it's criminal activity, it doesn't tend to compromise anyone's personal safety. So it doesn't really impact personal individual safety. So in that case, I'm going to have to say that despite there being a higher level of retail theft here, I don't think that that correlates with the loss of safety. Camp Hill has 11 police officers, 2 are sergeants, and 9 are patrol officers. We've recently hired a school safety officer, and our budget is $1.2 million annually. This is a fairly generous budget for a small town, and I think we have a great police department, and they do a great job of serving the community, and this is why we get to enjoy a very safe place to live. Access to goods and services. We have access to 2 major supermarkets, a farmer's market, a department store, several retail stores within walking distance from town, and we are developing a wonderful downtown with very many services. Market Street is home to hair salons, banks, law offices, medical doctors, and small shops. Childcare options are fairly widely available at the YMCA and several daycare centers located in churches throughout town. The community Facebook page offers many opportunities to trade and barter and locate services. This is a great resource in our community. There are oftentimes many people who are willing to share what they have with one another, and it is an amazing aspect of our community. Most of the time, if I need something, I tend to go to the Camp Hill Neighbor Facebook group and ask if anyone has something, and 9 times out of 10, someone does, and they're willing to share it, and that's a great aspect of our community. So, relationships. There are many intergenerational families that live in Camp Hill. But despite this, it's a really welcoming place. Many times you see when there's people who've lived in a community for a long time, there tends to be sort of an insider-outsider vibe. I have never experienced this. I feel that I moved here, I've been very welcome and very much included and a part of things, and I have really appreciated that people are really committed to this community and that they tend to stay or come back, because I think it's a great place. And I think that part of what keeps people here and draws people back is the fact that it really does have a strong center of gravity that bonds us all together. I have experienced this mostly in the group that I attend regularly called Ladies of Camp Hill. This is a group of supportive women. We meet pretty regularly for outings and events, and it's really, really great group of support to get that kind of, connection and to feel like you're a part of something. It's a really wonderful thing, and there are many ways in which you can experience that in Camp Hill. A lot of people are also fairly actively involved in their churches. I'm pretty involved in my church, Mount Calvary, and I have a lot of friends and neighbors that go there, and I get to experience different things with them as a result. Our library has wonderful events that help us to connect. Cornerstone Coffee House is a place where the community comes together frequently, and you just sort of get a sense of seeing people regularly, a lot of familiarity. People wave to you when they drive by, and it's been one of the most wonderful places I've ever lived, and I feel that it's been the easiest place to build relationships, and people really value one another and others a lot here. So, whole person principle and recognized place. One of the unique features of Camp Hill is the fact that our neighbors know one another fairly well. I can name just about everybody that lives within a 2-block radius of me, and I know at least 3 families per neighborhood minimum in Camp Hill. So we tend to know one another and, know one another from multiple contexts. So people I go to church with tend to be people that I engage with in other situations, work, through different activities that I do. So we tend to know people fairly well. Camp Hill has several members of the community that could be described as pillars of the community. We all know who they are, and they tend to start things and do things and create conversation, and that's a really great aspect of our community. Neighbors tend to know your regular activity and keep an eye out for your house and your children. I know that if I go away, I have next door neighbors that are going to look out for, strange activity. I've had great neighbors who've walked up to me and have said, I think your son might need to see a speech pathologist. I'm a speech pathologist, and I noticed when I was talking to him that he has a lisp, and you might want to get that looked at. That was great information. I didn't notice that because I don't have that professional training, but a neighbor pointed that out to me, and I thought, wow, that's pretty awesome that, a neighbor would be able to pick up on something like that and just let me know. Other things are, other parents tend to keep an eye out for your child. And if there's something that happens, they tend to reach out to you. One day my son was riding his bike without his helmet, and his teacher sent me a Facebook message that she had seen him roaming around town. I was like, hey, just let him know he needs to wear that helmet. And I was like, wow, thanks for letting me know. So that's one of the great things about Camp Hill. Predictability. I could set my watch by the people who walk past my house each day. Camp Hill is an active community. We tend to get out and walk and be a part of things. People are out walking their dogs all the time. There's a lot of healthy lifestyles and routines happening here. We also have some really great annual events and parades, and these things do a great job of binding our community. It's really awesome to see Santa coming through your neighborhood around Christmas on his fire truck. And, if you write to Santa, our wonderful mail carriers will write personal letters to each of the kids on their route. And it's just something that's a small town attribute that you just don't get that anywhere anymore. And it's pretty awesome. We also have a really great kite festival. This year we're getting a bubble guy. It's just people tend to come together. There's a bonfire. There's a lot of young families that get together and participate in all the community events. And our town does a really great job of putting wonderful community events together that are fairly widely attended by everyone. Homogeneity. Camp Hill is 89% white. Most families are middle and upper class. There are sections of town that are lower income. Houses tend to be smaller there, and many of the people who live in those neighborhoods are retirees that are downsizing. There are some apartments. The apartments tend to be the area where there's more cultural diversity. There are many young immigrant families. Predominantly, the groups of people that tend to move here, even from different cultural backgrounds, tend to value education and want their kids in a good school district. And so there is some homogeneity, even culturally, even within the ethnic diversity, because of the shared value of education that most of us are motivated to move here as a result of. So, opportunity. Camp Hill is a 5-minute drive from Harrisburg, which is Pennsylvania's capital city. There are many, many government jobs available to our residents, and many people do work at the capital. There are several major corporations, as I said earlier, and we are a very strong economy, and we are growing. That has been my presentation. I thank you very much for this time, and I hope that you learned something about my wonderful community, Camp Hill. It is a great place to live, and I do feel that it lives up to OSU's description of what a good community is. Thank you very much.